Hello and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating small moments, big decisions and unexpected ripples that create waves of change in brands, careers, leadership and in life. I'm Laura Barber, founder of The Ripple Impact, where we help businesses turn human stories into brand growth. After 20 years working with global giants like PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, I've seen firsthand how powerful storytelling can be not just for brands but for the people behind them. Each week I sit down with bold thinkers, founders, and what we call wave maker guests to explore the ripple moments that shaped their journey and the lessons you can take to transform your own business and your brand. Today, I'm so excited to have Joseph Liu with us, a global career consultant, speaker, and host of Career Relaunch podcast, which has reached listeners in over 170 countries. Joseph's mission is to help people find and pursue meaningful work, drawing on his own experience leading international brands before completely reinventing his career. He's a TEDx speaker, Forbes featured expert, and someone who's turned his own reinventions into inspiring others to navigate change. Joseph, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much, Laura. Nice to see you again, and thanks for that very flattering introduction. It's very nice of you.
Do you know what? My guests say this all the time. They're like, oh, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm like,
Very well
it's
done, yeah.
all your incredible work. So thank you so much for being with us today. I'm delighted to see you after so many years, and I'm sure we will get into that. But I often love to start right at the beginning and the ripple moments that have really shaped people and how it all started. Can you give our listeners a little inside track to you, your career, how it all started and what you brought to where you are today?
Sure. Well, so my name's Joseph Liu. I'm a personal branding and career consultant is what I call myself. My title is sometimes hard to capture in a few words, but generally right now my work is focused on helping people pursue more meaningful work. And I do three types of work right now. I'm a speaker, workshop, and webinar host. I speak primarily about personal branding and career transition topics. I'm a career advisor, so you might see my comments featured in publications like Forbes and Fast Company. And finally, as you mentioned, I'm also a podcast host. I host a podcast called Career Relaunch, and I feature people who have made major career changes. And speaking of change, you asked about my career history. So I've been doing this work for about 12 years now. But prior to this, I spent about 10 years working in brand marketing, as you know, which is where you and I first crossed paths. And before that, I thought I wanted to become a doctor. So I went through quite a few career transitions and pivots. I would say some of them were more major than others, but they were all quite, I'd say, emotionally fraught with a lot of ups and downs. And so I left medical school after 2 weeks, and I did that because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew it wasn't medical school anymore. And then I eventually got into the world of marketing, corporate brand marketing, and also consumer goods brand marketing. Another major pivot was leaving the US to move to the UK. And the most recent pivot was leaving the corporate world to start my own business, which is what I now do.
Yeah. And tell me about the pivot from doctor to marketing. So you're 2 weeks in. Did you know before the course started, or did you join the course and was like, this just doesn't feel like me? That's quite a pivot. What happened?
Yeah, I actually think in hindsight, Laura, I did know that it wasn't right for me, but I just chose to ignore it. And this is something that comes up with a lot of people I now speak to who have set a goal for themselves. And in spite of feeling like it might not be the right goal, they just pursue it because we all have this desire to complete what we started. So I started off very young. Like when I was maybe 5 years old, I thought I wanted to become a doctor. And it really just started because I had an injury. I fell off a bed and I cut my forehead open, and then I had it stitched up, and I was really impressed by that doctor. And literally from that moment on, I thought I wanted to become a doctor. And then in the United States, the way it works is you go through 4 years of undergraduate studies to then apply to medical school, and then you take a 10-hour exam. And so it's quite an endeavor to get into medical school. And throughout that process of going through university and spending my summers doing medical research, mostly just to bolster my medical school application, during those experiences, I noticed I just wasn't that happy. But I just plugged forward, as many of us do. I just pushed forward. And it wasn't really until I got to medical school that I realized I really made a mistake. And it was mostly just because I felt like I was misplaced. I did not feel anything similar to the other students there. And most importantly, I just didn't feel like I was making the most of who I am. And so I felt very constricted in that environment. So
Yeah.
that's what triggered me to leave.
Yeah. Amazing. Because like from a story of childhood accident and being inspired by the doctors that helped you and cared for you to then go, that's the career I want, to then pursue it for so many years, to have these moments of not feeling quite in place, if that's the right expression.
Yeah.
But then having the bravery to go 2 weeks in to something you've committed so many years to say, this isn't for me. How did
Yeah.
you take that brave step? Because as you said, often people just push through. You could have just continued
Yeah.
through medical school, came out the other side. What was it that
Mhm.
gave you the bravery or the decision making to go, no, this isn't right for me?
It was really hard, Laura. I say it now, okay, I left after 2 weeks, but those first 2 weeks of medical school were
Mm.
probably the most emotionally painful, I guess professionally at least. That was probably the most emotionally painful experience of my life, just because I had invested so much to get there. And
Yeah.
I hadn't really entertained the idea of doing anything else. So I remember those 2 weeks very well. I remember being in gross anatomy and feeling like I just didn't feel right being there. It just didn't fit what I'd imagined it was going to feel like having achieved this goal of getting to medical school. I was
Mm.
very unhappy. I was very overwhelmed by the content. I felt very different from the other students in terms of, I guess, my ambition to memorize. And so most of it came down to just feeling really bad every day. Honestly, like that's what it came down to. I just woke up every morning. I
Yeah.
just dreaded going to medical school. I was at the Georgetown School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and I would walk. Actually, interesting, I would walk through the business school there to get to the medical school. And whenever I walked through the business school there, I always felt like I was more at home there. And I would get to the medical school and I'd feel completely out of place. It actually, the moment that convinced me to leave medical school, I remember it very well, was I was working on creating a documentary of sorts for our class because I'd come out of working in radio. So I was going to do an audio documentary. This was way before podcasting even existed.
Yeah.
And this was in 2002. And I got into some serious trouble for that. Like I remember getting yanked out of the classroom by one of the administrators, and she told me, you can't be doing this here. And I just felt like, wow, this is like a creative part of me that I just felt was just getting
Yeah.
suffocated. And I just thought, I'm only 2 weeks into this, and I already feel like I can't be who I really want to be. And so, yeah, called up my parents and I told them that I was planning on leaving. And they were actually very supportive of it, surprisingly. But my dad did point out that it was going to be a complete mess for a while. So he asked me if I was prepared for there to be a major mess in my life. And I
Mm.
just felt like I just couldn't do it anymore. It
Yeah.
was just too emotionally draining for me. So I just
Mm.
decided to do it,
Yeah.
just knowing that I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do instead, but I knew it wasn't that. So I felt like I would
Yeah.
figure it out. Yeah.
Oh, good for you. Because as I said, it takes such bravery to do that. And as you said, not knowing what's on the other side and not necessarily knowing, okay, this is the thing I'm going to do next. And, as your
Yeah.
father said, there's going to be a bit of a mess and a muddle before you get to the next stage. It takes serious bravery to do that. So good for you, because a lot of people will sit in situations that they know aren't quite right, but don't necessarily have the resources or the support or the tenacity to go after it. So I think that's really commendable. So how on earth did you get from medical school 2 weeks in, I'm leaving, you call your parents,
Yeah.
talk us to the next stage to get to a career of marketing when you're working on food and luxury brands? Like how does that even work?
Yeah, it was really bumpy, Laura. It was not a clean transition. And I actually, one
Mm.
of the things I remember doing was telling my mother at the time that I just needed some time to myself, that she probably wasn't going to hear from me for a while. And I wasn't going to do anything bad. I wasn't in any trouble, but I just needed some time to myself to just sort stuff out without the
Mm.
influence of other people. And not that my parents were like pushing me one way or the other. They were actually quite good
Mm.
about that, but I just
Mm.
really needed some time to myself. And what I did was I did a lot of informational interviewing with people who were outside. And I say, well, I needed time to myself, but part of that was actually connecting with individuals in different spaces to understand what it was that they did. I talked with dentists. I talked with people who are EMTs. I became an emergency medical technician for a while just to test that
Oh,
out.
wow.
I didn't fully let go of the medical school idea for a while. I thought about reapplying to a different school. And fortunately, one of the informational interviews I conducted was with somebody who worked in health policy. She happened to be
Mm.
having lunch with a guy at the time named Dan Mendelsohn, who had just founded a health policy consulting firm called Health Strategies Consultancy, which was across the street from where I lived in Washington, D.C. So I went and I interviewed, and she got my resume in front of him. And that's where I ended up working the next 3 years. And one of the projects I worked on, aside from being a health policy consultant, was a corporate rebranding initiative to rename the company from Health Strategies Consultancy to what it's now known as, which is Avalier Health. And I loved that.
Hmm.
And that was where I just followed the energy. And I felt super
Yeah.
energized by coming up with the names and the creative development of the new logo and figuring out the colors and the fonts and working with the creative team. And I love that. So I decided that I wanted to go to business school to broaden out my business acumen. And then from there, that's how I ended up moving into the consumer packaged goods industry. And that was
Yeah.
a choice I made based on some really good advice from second year MBA students who told me, don't worry about where you're marketing, just go to a good company that is known for its marketing. So I went to Clorox. I was marketing bin liners and drain opener initially, which this wasn't something I was aspiring to do, but it was a great, really great experience, learning the nuts and bolts of marketing there. And then that's where I started working in the more formalized, fast-moving consumer goods industry. And that was in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's so lovely that you talk about following the energy, because when you talked about medical school and walking through the business school and feeling you fit, how
Yeah.
incredible to feel that you fit just in a space, and then going to medical school and not feeling that. That's totally down to energy. So it's amazing that you felt that, and that's what you then continue to do. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I do remember I went to the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business to do my MBA.
Mm.
And I do remember I paid very close attention to the first 2 weeks there because I just thought, okay, one of the things I was concerned about was I making another mistake? Like, was I pursuing
Yeah.
this too quickly? That felt more correct to me. So, but when
Mm.
I got there, I did notice that just like walking around the halls, I remember seeing like the Wall Street Journal newspaper sitting in the corner, and there's just like an energy and a vibe in the air that I felt was more me. And I
Yeah.
do think it's useful to pay attention to where you feel at home in your professional
Mm.
career. And I definitely felt that when I was at business school. And surprisingly, even though I never really envisioned myself working for a big corporation, I felt quite at home at Clorox. I really enjoyed my time there. And I didn't
Yeah.
mind marketing trash bags for a living. I thought it was really interesting. And I thought the people were really great there. And I loved the community of marketers at Clorox. Yeah, I really liked marketing at the time.
Yeah, amazing. And then we met at General Mills.
That is correct. Yes. So one of the major transitions that I was about to go into was when I left the Bay Area to move to London. That was for personal reasons. My then girlfriend, now wife, was based in London when I was in the Bay Area. And so I decided to move out here. I didn't have a job at first when I moved here. And then I landed at Goo, which is a luxury desserts
Mhm.
brand. At the time was a startup in the UK. I struggled there, I would say. I didn't quite feel like it was me. And part of it was maybe just it was really fast paced with the startup environment there. I was the only American there at the time, one of the only men on the team, one of the oldest guys on the team. So I felt very much like an outlier in that company.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I really enjoyed marketing that brand. And then, yes, you and I crossed paths at a time when I was actually not very happy with how things were going at that moment in my career because I just didn't feel culturally like I was quite at the
Mm.
right company for me at that moment in my life. And so I met you during my first round interview at General Mills.
Yeah,
And
that's right. Yeah.
that is how I ended up at General Mills was
Yeah. So I didn't put you off then.
cleared me to go you cleared me to go to the next round. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. That it almost is bizarre because it feels like just a moment ago, and in a way, it has been decades. So, which is
It's
incredible.
crazy. I mean,
So
that was
it is
2012.
crazy.
Yeah, that was 2012 when I first
Yeah.
met you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. And now you're helping people. So you've gone from products to people. So moving from managing marketing of luxury products and from food, as you say, Clorox, to then managing and helping people in their transition, which is fascinating to take that kind of consumer branding philosophy into much more personal branding and human reinvention almost, and career reinvention. What inspired that pivot? Because again, another big pivotal career moment for you.
Yeah, that was another tough one. Like all these pivots, anytime anybody makes a pivot in their career, I have almost never crossed paths with anybody who says, yeah, that was really straightforward. Like I just did it and it's just called it a day.
Yeah.
I found that very difficult because I thought General Mills was a great company to work for.
Mm.
And I was working with a great manager at the time, Kathy Kidd. And so she was a fantastic manager and she was very supportive of my ambitions and my interests. And she sensed that I had an interest in the people side of things. And I had taken up a coaching course on the side at the time. And I loved doing that. I loved the life coach training that I did. And I started coaching clients on the evenings and weekends. And then I just couldn't handle it all. I was working on the global team at the time with Kathy and the headquarters, and it was a demanding role, and I just couldn't keep doing both. And then around that time, I got married, and then my father passed away. Unfortunately, that same year I got married, and that just made me think a lot about what I was doing with my life. I didn't mind marketing ice cream, but I didn't always feel good about it either. As somebody who was once wanting to become a doctor, it just didn't quite feel right to me. So there were other brands at General Mills I probably would have been more, I guess, aligned with marketing, perhaps, just because of my own beliefs and things like that. So my own lifestyle. I decided to just walk away from that role and just went for it. I just thought, life's too short. I don't want to just play it safe in my career. I don't want to focus on getting more people to eat more ice cream indefinitely. And I just felt like I wanted to do something different. So I left it behind. And then I just started coaching on the side initially, one-on-one with clients. That's the pivot I made.
And how did you find the pivot? Because the pivot from corporate to setting up your own business is quite a seismic one. How did it feel? How did you process it? How did you manage it?
Yeah, it felt right to me. Like it felt like the right thing to do for me. I never really doubted that it was the right thing to do, but it was really hard. Like it was, and not just the logistics of like setting up your own business and finding clients and figuring out like silly stuff, like how to get a button to show up on your website, or like which invoicing software should you use, or I mean, just like little administrative things you take for granted when you work in the corporate world, where that's just all taken care of for you. And so I was spending a lot of time on like admin or like the legal structure of what my company should. It be a limited company? Should I be a sole trader? I don't even know what the difference between those are. What are the tax implications? So I got caught up in a lot of that stuff, and coaching clients was really rewarding, but it was very intense. And at some point I felt like I can't build my life around coaching individuals one by one. As much as I enjoy that financially, logistically, practically speaking, there's not enough hours in the week.
Yeah, there's only one you.
Yeah, there's only one me. So yeah, I found it hard to let go of the fancy corporate title. I've missed having colleagues. It felt very lonely the first few years, actually. And so I guess what kept me moving forward was that the fact that I really enjoyed the work, and I felt like it was really fulfilling. I felt like this was me, and that I liked the idea of building something and also coaching people. Like it all kind of just came together. So, but it was tough.
And was there a cumulative effect of all your learning from all your different steps, or did this pivot feel really different? Like, was it brand storytelling into people storytelling, or was it actually really quite different?
To be honest, Laura, I did not set out when I first started this business. I did not set out to link marketing with personal branding with career change. It organically happened that way. I was very focused on helping people navigate career changes. That was the original vision for my company. In fact, I called it initially Onward Coaching, and then I later found out I couldn't use that term because like somebody else had it or something. And so it was only later that I started to feel like I could tap in more to my background, and I started to see the parallels between relaunching a brand and relaunching your own life and your own career. And it just a lot of perils came up, like dealing with the resistance to changing a brand name, or the brand's packaging, or the importance of defining who you are as a brand before you try to market who you are as a brand. Like that all started to come together as part of the journey of reinventing yourself. So it happened over time. It happened as I started to shift more into speaking and workshops, which is the vast majority of the work I do now. And as I was developing content, I could see the parallels coming together. And that's how I now talk about my work. And it is nice to be able to tap into my past corporate experiences, both in brand marketing, but also just like dealing with people and client relationships and things like that.
Yeah. And how lovely to go, actually, I want a career that is really fulfilling for me. And I want to help people in their career transition. And that's my goal and that's my passion. As you said earlier, follow the energy. And then over time it evolves and it morphs and it changes, where you almost cherry pick all the best bits from your life, your career, your learning, your education, people that you've met, the stakeholders, the bosses, the people you've been around, to then form something that is uniquely you and that you can uniquely bring to other people and pass that on to others. Like, how lovely is that?
Yeah, it's been a really rewarding ride in some way. I mentioned to you it's been very challenging over the years. I would say the first maybe 4 or 5 years were challenging, but what kept me moving forward was just feeling like this was right, like not just the work, but like the lifestyle that comes with running your own
Yeah.
business and being able to control your time. And
Mm,
I I remember the first year I spoke with my wife, because we had just gotten married and I was now leaving my steady paycheck behind at General Mills to do this thing that may or may not work. And we did sit down and we agreed, okay, let's give you a year here, given our
mm,
savings that we have in pocket. If after a year you don't have the income that we feel is sustainable over time, then I
mm,
would go back to the corporate world. Like that was always
yeah.
a plan B. But the
Mm.
thought of going back, like that is what kept me. Like I did not want to go back at that moment in my life. It just wasn't something I wanted to do at that moment. So I felt like I
Yeah.
have to make this work. There was no other. I felt like I burned the boats. Like this, I had to make this work,
Mm,
and that was helpful. That was really helpful to not have the option of going back,
yeah.
meant to like to know that I don't want to do that, and I got to find a way to make this work.
Mm. For anyone who's listening and feeling, I'm sitting in a place of uncertainty and I don't feel quite comfortable where I am. I don't feel like I fit. I don't feel like my values align to this organization or this role or this education or this industry, and knowing it's not quite right for them. What would you say if they're afraid to move on? Like, what would you say to them to give them the advice or the guidance or the support to take that next step, like you've done many times?
Well, first of all, I would very openly acknowledge that moving on is much harder than holding on to what you have.
Mm,
So if somebody is feeling like, oh, I really want to change, but I just can't quite do it, I don't think anybody should feel bad about that, should feel like they aren't like brave enough, that they don't have it in them to do it. It is just very natural to feel like you want to maintain what you've got. That is the most human thing, is
mm,
to not interrupt the flow that you've got in your life, even if you don't love how things are going. Because the idea of changing, it introduces a lot of risk, uncertainty, fear, financial instability. That is just, it's very understandable. And so I wouldn't rush it. Everybody needs to move on when the time is right for them. And that is what I sometimes
mm,
get asked, like, why did it take you so long to, like, why didn't you just break away from the medical school path before you went through all the hassle of like going to Georgetown and then pulling out, paying the tuition? It just sometimes it just takes a while to figure these things
mm,
out. And all I would say is that I would think a little bit about what really matters the most to you at this moment, and then ask yourself, what can you be doing to honor that thing? So for somebody, it might be, well, I need to make ends meet, so I need to earn a steady paycheck right now. Well, if that's the case, then okay, maybe you stick around a little bit longer. But if it's something like, hey, I want to be able to feel like I have enough energy on the weekends to enjoy my weekends and not feel depleted from my work every week, well, then you may want to reconsider how you're spending your work days. So
mm,
I think a
mm.
lot of it comes down to figuring out what really matters to you and just making sure you're honoring that.
Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
part. Yeah, that's great. And you've talked really beautifully before about the importance of endings and letting go of one chapter to create space for the other. And I love
Mm.
the little analogy you gave of, I feel like I've burnt the boat, so I'm on to
Yeah.
the next thing. That feels like quite
Right.
a seismic end. Can you
Yeah.
talk to us about the importance of ending and how that allows you to move forward?
It's really important, Laura. That's a fantastic question, by the way, is like the importance of bringing something to closure before you can really fully move on.
Mm,
And that is why I think it's really important not to rush into making a change. And sometimes you might feel a pressure from family and friends, and they can see it. Like they can see how miserable
yeah.
you are, and they want you to change. Like they would be relieved if you didn't come home every day in a bad mood. But it is a very personal choice to move on, and that it's just important to acknowledge that it can take some time.
Yeah.
I suppose it's just there's a lot of factors at play when you make a change. And so I wish I had like a magic formula, but what's really important is that people take the time to reflect between those two stages, because if you don't have full closure on one, it's kind of like breaking up with somebody. If you're still thinking about the other person, you're going to have a really hard time moving on. So whatever you need to do to get closure, and sometimes it's reflection, sometimes it is actually moving on to something else so that you can fill that void. But it's important to get very clear with yourself about why you're leaving something behind and why you're going towards something else. How you get that clarity is self-reflection, talking with somebody you trust, asking a mentor. I really think, though, that sometimes it is just taking some actions that you realize end up filling you with more energy, and then you start to understand what you didn't have before. Reflection is important, but taking actions is also quite important and quite illuminating.
Yeah, I love that. Time, reflection, and then taking action to help you move forward into something else is such a lovely thought, because it must be such an emotional transition. I mean, I feel it. I've gone corporate to my own business, and there's an emotional transition that goes with it as well that I underestimated. Like, I personally underestimated how vulnerable I was going to feel, kind of putting Laura out there rather than being part of a bigger corporate organization and having a functional opinion. Now it's fully me. So, that emotional transition is big. And that was the bit that I probably underestimated, actually.
That's huge. Like, I think a lot of it is what's in our head, and it's that imposter syndrome. I felt a lot of that when I was first starting out. I was giving talks to people, and a lot of them were older than me, because sometimes I was working with executive MBAs, and they were older than me by a decade at the time, and I got challenged a lot, actually, by a lot of those people, and it definitely rattled me quite a bit. So there's imposter syndrome. There is wondering if you've made the right move. There is wondering if you made the right move at the right time. And so I have a ton of like self-dialogue. It's probably like an excessive amount compared to the average person. I'm always like reevaluating and wondering if I'm doing the right thing. And there's a lot of internal dialogue, even when I'm just like sitting down, just chatting with people. I'm thinking, like, am I coming across the right way? Am I saying the right things? I don't know if it's like a lack of confidence. I think it's more of just, I'm just always wondering if I could be doing things a little bit better.
Yeah.
And
You're incredibly successful. How do you take what you've taught in terms of self-narrative into, no, I've got this? Like, how do you do that? Because from the outside, you're exceptionally successful, and you're saying like you've still got the imposter syndrome and the narrative going on. We had a podcast a few weeks ago with Nina Purewell, and she was saying you have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are negative, which is absolutely terrifying. Like, how do you kind of overcome that?
So I have a lot of self-talk. I do believe a lot in the impact that self-talk has on you. And so actually what I studied in my undergraduate university days, what I majored in was psychology. And I've always been fascinated by the human mind. And if you think about it, like, marketing is just psychology in the marketplace and human behavior in the marketplace. So it all makes sense now that I would eventually go into marketing. But I would say that by doing things, it actually helps you become more confident. I suppose one of the earlier talks I watched was by Amy Cuddy, who's a Harvard she focused on organizational behavior, but she talks about the importance of your body language. And so how by doing something, you become it. You don't wait for yourself to feel confident. You'll do it, and that will make you confident. And so I listened to a lot of stuff in the early days that really was good for my mind. So I listened to a ton of podcasts early on. I would listen to a guy named Scott Britton, who unfortunately doesn't run that podcast anymore, but it's called The Competitive Edge. And he was always talking about mindset. And I felt like that was really useful to me, to have some sort of inspiration, whether it's a podcast or a TED Talk or whatever, reading a book, whatever it is. I think that source of inspiration is quite important. And that's helped me stay on track. And when I was giving talks early on, I would just tell myself, like, I'm going to give the best talk of anybody here today. And whether that was true or not, I would just tell myself that. And then eventually over time, you start to become it. And so, but I still get nervous with public speaking, and I still think about ways to improve it.
Yeah, amazing. I love the fact that you're like, I still get nervous doing public speaking. It was like, tell us how many, because you told me this when we joined the call and we said, hello, how are you? And then we hit record. Tell our listeners how many talks you do between September and October.
Well, between September and October, it's somewhere between like 60 and 70 talks between around those 8 weeks. And then it's not as intensive the rest of the year, but I give approximately around 100 talks. Some of them are in person, some of them are virtual webinars. So that it is a lot of public speaking. So I don't get nervous that much anymore, but I still feel nerves. Like I still feel it when I'm up there.
Yeah. It's so nice though, because in a way, because there's comfort that people where it is their profession and they're such experts at TED Talks and, Forbes, etc. Like, you're so incredibly brilliant at it, and this is now your career. So I think for our listeners, knowing that even someone who does that many talks in so many different places to so many different clients and organizations and institutions, to still feel the nerves, I'm sure is going to be really comforting for people who maybe it's their first speaking event they've got and they're like, I'm so nervous. It's like, it's totally natural and it's totally normal, and someone who's an expert still feels it. So I'm sure that'll bring a lot of comfort to people, I'm sure.
I think that's really important, Laura, because I also remember when I was listening to these podcasts early on, I would also listen to other podcasts where there are these people who are just like these like billionaires or millionaires. I just could not only could I not relate to them, but I just felt like, wow, that seems really daunting to do what they pulled off. And what I have found over the years of doing this is, whether you're talking about public speaking or just navigating a career change, is that if you know that it's going to be tough, then when it is tough, it doesn't throw you off that much. You don't think there's something wrong with you or that you've made the wrong decision. It's just that this is just par for the course, is that when you get up on stage, you are going to feel nervous probably. And it's not because you're not a good public speaker. It's just because that's what most people feel in that situation. It's okay if it feels difficult. It's okay if something feels bumpy initially. It does not mean you're on the wrong path. It just means it's hard to do. And as is the case with many things, whether it's navigating career transition or reinventing yourself or public speaking or hosting a podcast like this, if it feels hard, it's because it is. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it really, really well. So
yeah. And you do yours really well. So Career Relaunch has been, a decade now, hasn't it? So
almost,
incredible.
9 years. 9 years.
Wow. Almost a year, almost just shy of 10
almost
years,
there. Yeah.
And you've interviewed incredible guests from all over the world. I'd love to know, like, is there a thread that you hear? Has there been particular moments that stand out? I mean, as you said, you've been inspired by many, many podcasts, and now you're doing that too, of stories that will move other people. Has there been any moments that have really stood out for you, or overarching things that you gain from your guests and what you're hearing?
I learn a lot from my guests, Laura, as I'm sure you experience the same. Is just when you have these one-on-one conversations with people, you do start to notice patterns that come up. Like, I definitely see themes that come up. And one of the big themes is just that most of the people who I've interviewed on the show, most of these people have made pretty major career pivots. Most of them did not know exactly what it was they wanted to do instead. It was very rare that I would interview somebody who said, well, I definitely want to do this instead. I mean, occasionally, yes, but most of the time it was just that people knew they didn't want to keep doing what they were currently doing. They had some semblance of an idea of what they wanted to do. And the ones who ended up being able to pull it off eventually just took an approximate best guess at what would broadly move them in a slightly better direction, even if it wasn't like the perfect move. And then they would make the next approximate move. And through this series of like successive approximations, they would eventually find something that brought them a lot of joy. But it's not normally the case that people just pull off in one fell swoop the change that they want to make. So that's been one major theme that's come up.
I really like that, because it's not, let's pull the rug. It's like, let's pivot a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Let's take one more step. Let's do one extra thing. Let's do a new course. Let's learn about coaching. And then over time, that actually takes you to the direction that maybe you were always meant to take, who knows, but ultimately gets you to a position where all of your skill sets and values and motivations align. So what a really nice thought, that you don't have to have all the answers at the beginning, but you will build that over time as you learn, as you experiment, as you take different paths.
Yep. I've also learned that, there's so many things I could go into on this. One of the major ones is just the emotional dynamics of change. Is that we talk about the practicalities of redoing your CV or getting through the interview process or networking with the right people. But a lot of it is emotional. Like, a lot of it's what's in your head and what you think is possible. And not to get too like touchy feely, but like, if you don't believe your own narrative, it's very difficult to sell it to other people. If you don't believe that you deserve to have a life or a career where you're actually energized by it, if you don't think that your job can actually bring you joy and that it's just to bring in a paycheck, then it's very difficult to pursue it. Like, it's difficult to pursue that other path. So that mindset really matters a lot, and the emotions matter a lot. like
Yeah.
managing your emotions.
And without giving away all your tips and tricks, like what advice would you give people that are at that intersection of change and are going through these emotional stages? Like, what advice would you give people?
Well, I would probably ask yourself the question, if you're thinking about making a change, you're on the cusp of change, but you haven't quite pulled the trigger yet. I would just ask yourself how long you will continue to tolerate your current situation. So that's probably one really important thing to think about, because you could probably tolerate it indefinitely, but how long are you willing to tolerate this situation before you finally do something about it? Whatever your situation is, if I don't know whether you're unhappy with your boss, or you're not able to maintain a work-life balance and you can't get home to see your kids, just ask yourself, is continuing on this path worth it for me? You're gaining something from it. Is it worth what it's costing you? And understanding that balance between those two can sometimes help you. It can help prompt action. But I'm always kind of careful to avoid the advice along the lines of, well, you should just go for it. You just do it. You just do it. If you feel like you should just do it today, because it's not quite that simple for people. It's very nuanced, these things.
Yeah.
But once you feel like the costs are outweighing the benefits, then you owe it to yourself to move on.
Yeah, I love that. How do you help people find meaning in their work? So if someone's coming to you with a almost a personal rebrand, there isn't a thing, right? There isn't a product, there might be a service, but how do you help people in the personal branding space to really gain their confidence and build their narrative and build their story? So we're not talking products anymore, we're talking people. How do you help them find meaning and momentum in their work?
There's a few things that we can go through. Part of it is just taking a complete inventory of what you have done. Sometimes people forget about all the things that they've done. It's sometimes just getting it on paper, like taking an inventory of all the accomplishments that you've had, both personally and professionally over time, can be a good starting point. And then if it's somebody who's trying to make a transition, it's trying to figure out, well, one of the issues that people have is feeling like, oh, well, none of my past experiences maps to my future desired role. Oftentimes, if you dig a little bit, you can find something that is a transferable skill that is relevant to your future role. And if you can go through and selectively pick out those experiences, you can start to create a bit of a story and a narrative. But a lot of it is really just sitting down with taking a look at all your accomplishments, figuring out, okay, which of these do I want to pull out as part of my narrative, and literally going through and rehearsing what that narrative is, not just so you can communicate it to other people, but so you can convince yourself of it, like you buy into the story. So that's part of it. And again, part of it is just taking action and trying it out, is trying to not push people, but encouraging people to take small steps to take action, to speak to somebody in your target industry, try out this pitch with somebody, see how it lands with them, but to get it out of your head and to move on from reflection to eventually taking action. So it's not that dissimilar to product marketing. You take some time to define who you are, what aspects of yourself you feel are marketable to other people. But then at some point you got to go out and you got to market it. You got to network, you got to pitch yourself. So it's both.
You talked earlier about almost the risk of holding on and how long you're willing to put up with a scenario and potentially a difficult situation that you want to get out of. What are the benefits of going forward and really going where the energy is, as you described it earlier, and creating a career that has come from you and come from your passion and come from joy? What are the benefits to people to really embracing that change?
There are so many, Laura. I know I've talked a lot about the challenges and that I'm just trying to be very transparent about the journey. At the same time, I can speak from both personally and also having spoken to clients, people on my podcast, people who come to my workshops, that if you make the effort to pursue more meaningful work, it is absolutely worth it. It means you've created a situation where you can look forward to your work week. You can feel energized by your work. You can be proud of what you do. You can literally tell people, hey, I love what I do for a living. I love the work setup that I have. I personally, I've gone through a few different career changes and they have been bumpy along the way, but I can look people in the eye right now and I can tell people I'm really, really happy professionally. I really can't imagine it being much better. I feel like the work is fulfilling. I feel like the lifestyle is one that works really well for me. We've got a young daughter at home. She's about to turn 8, and the past 7 years of her life, I can really feel like I have been very present in her life in a way that I don't really think I would have been able to if I was still working on a big global team reporting to people in different time zones. I have felt like I have a very good work-life balance. And yes, September, October are busy, but the rest of the year, I can be there for drop-offs and pickups. I can be there for the school events. I have not missed a single one of her school events. And that really matters a lot to me. And there are all sorts of like lifestyle benefits also to doing not only work that you enjoy, but having the energy when you're not working to enjoy the rest of your life is quite important. So yeah, it goes back to the energy piece. So I do hope that people will consider it and that they can feel assured that if they're doing work that they care about, and if they feel like their professional life is in a good place, the rest of their life will likely feel a lot better too.
Oh, it's such a beautiful thought. This idea of meaning and energy and going with a passion and really embracing your joy and taking that into really meaningful work. Wow, what a lovely thought. My final question that we ask all of our guests. So we call our guests wave makers because they've been making incredible waves on the industry and the people that their life and their career touches. What advice would you give to aspiring wave makers? So it might be those people who want to make a brave change or they're about to make a ripple on their own life. What advice would you give to them?
Well, if you're about to make a big change, or if you're thinking about making a change, or even if you're struggling to make that big change that you want to make, I would advise that people make choices that honor who you are and act in ways that are consistent with the person you want to become. And if you can do these two things, then you'll have the clarity, confidence, and the courage to have a career and a life that you're going to find truly meaningful. So that's what I would leave people with.
That's beautiful. Clarity, confidence, and the courage. Like, what a beautiful summary of such a wonderful conversation. Joseph Liu, thank you so much for taking us under the surface of your personal reinvention of storytelling and purpose. This idea of walking through the business school to the medical school and feeling an energy mismatch and then going for that and leaning into that, and all the career pivots that you've had along the way to take you to the journey of where you are now. Such a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is start again. It takes bravery, it takes courage, but wow, the emotional and the life benefits that can have is just so powerful. So thank you for sharing your story with us. And for our listeners, knowing that one small ripple can create such a seismic change in your life and the lessons that we can take forward. So thank you so much for such a lovely story. Please reach out to Joseph if you're on the point of change in your career and you'd like some advice going forward. If you're looking to elevate the human storytelling of your brands, please get in touch with us, The Ripple Impact, so we can see how we can help your business. That is a wrap on this Ripple episode. Tune in weekly for more bold voices and inspiring wave-making guests just like Joseph. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share with anyone who will love this episode. Joseph, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. Deeply appreciated to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much, Laura. Nice to talk with you again, and thanks for putting all this together.
Thank you so much. I'm Laura Barber. This is The Ripple Impact. We will see you all next week. Thank you, Joseph. For everyone else, we'll see you then. Bye for now.